All right, everybody. Tim Adams here again. Welcome to this Hangout on Air. We're going to be talking about ongoing training. How do we keep our church tech teams current on not only current trends and techniques, but also the equipment that we're using? A lot of us, never received proper training on the equipment that we're using every week, and in a lot of ways that holds us back. And so we want to be constantly improving. We want to get to the point where, maybe if we're asked to do something a little off the wall that we're not accustomed to doing, then we know how to do that because we've either taken it upon ourselves to understand and learn the systems and equipment that we're using, or somebody has been brought in to train us how to do that. So with us are three people. Sorry, I'm a master's graduate in English, apparently. So we have Zach Smina, Paul Allen Clifford, and we also have Michael Ray. So we got a couple new guys, which is awesome. And Paul, why don't you start us off with answering this question? What do you feel is the biggest drawback to, say, a one-time training on, say, new equipment gets upgraded, you get 1-2 hour block of time on a piece of equipment, and then that's it?
Well, there's a couple of issues with that. But probably the biggest one that I could see is people change, and it's not that each individual becomes someone new, although there's some truth to that. What I mean is if it's 2010 and everyone on your tech team is trained on this equipment, by 2014, maybe 50% of those people are still there. If you're lucky, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's more, but still you've got more people coming in that didn't get the training from the original person, so they're a little clueless as to what's going on. So I think that's probably the biggest drawback. The second one is that you're not going to learn everything about a piece of equipment in 2 hours. It's just not possible. Even if the person tells you everything about it, you're not necessarily going to learn it. In my experience, learning is like a 4-step process. You watch someone do it, you help them do it, they help you do it, and then you do it all by yourself. And while maybe that's okay on something very, very simple, when it comes to something very, very complex, you're just going to forget all kinds of details. You're going to forget all the things that it can do. You're just going to forget a lot. And if you're the one training subsequent people and you've forgotten a lot, then they have even less of a chance of understanding it unless they dive into the manuals or look for training online or do something like that, go to conferences. There's a few different ways to do it, but they just don't have much chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you said, you're not going to learn the ins and outs of how a piece of equipment works in 2 hours. That's absolutely true. And even in that 2 hour period, you're usually probably only learning the things that you need to learn, because if you're really invested in the training, you're looking at it from the perspective of okay, how can I get to the level that I was at with the old piece of equipment? Because that's all I need to know right now. And so your perspective is from the point that I just need, okay, I was operating at this level on the old equipment, and I'm starting all from scratch, and I need to be at least at that new level. And so that's where your focus is, right? And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's what happens 2 months down the road, 6 months down the road, a year. You get all this time. This level that you've reached is not necessarily good enough anymore, because you always want to be better. There's always room for improvement. It's not like, okay, I know how to do this and this and this and this with this audio mixer, right? And that means I have arrived. I know exactly what to do. I can teach everybody else how to do it. Well, you know what? Eventually what's going to happen is if you stop learning, then the people that are coming behind you are going to, some of them are going to get to the point where they're like, okay, teach me more. Well, if you haven't learned more, then you're going to be like the visual basic programming class I took in high school where the teacher was barely keeping in front of the students. You know, and it got to the point where we'd do the assignment in half an hour while he was reading the book, you know, the next chapter, and we'd be playing Duke Nukem 3D. So there is room for improvement, you know, and maybe you do know the equipment. Okay, what are some of the ways you can improve the processes for your colleagues or your team members? What are some areas that need some growth? You know, how can you invest in people? And you know, we're talking about that right now, and we just have Aaron Hope that just came back to us, and we're gonna let him kind of acclimate here. But Michael, I'm a little curious as to, you know, you said that off air that you're really good at sound engineering. Okay, maybe you can kind of walk us through a little bit. You know, how did you get to learn that? You know, was it just through experience? Was it through somebody teaching you over the course of time? You know, how did that come about?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I would say that I learned audio first through, well, a digital audio workstation, and basically my mentor, which is John Lance. I mean, he's been doing sound for like 50 years. Um, he kind of taught me the ropes first. He taught me how to use the essentials like EQ and compression, basically, and then learning how to use that first, and learning how to sit everything in the mix well. Specifically, if you have a bunch of instruments on the stage, and I've like the subjects on like training your people. I mean, sometimes I have to hold my tongue because we have so many people coming in, jumping on the board, and it's just a mess. I mean, because they think that, well, if this guy's not loud enough, then we'll just turn the volume knob up, and it's like that. Well, maybe you just need to EQ it or just cut someone else back. But yeah, I learned most of if I was to influence anyone to learn sound, one is learn EQ and how that works, and then move on to compression, and then start getting into your delays and your reverbs and stuff like that. And I know that working on a DAW is a lot different than working with something live, because each even if you're stationary, even the temperature in the room can change the way things sound. And so you have to compress and EQ things better. But to answer your question, I learned mainly. Some people learn on an actual analog board. I learned through a DAW. So yeah, whoever wants to speak next.
All right, excellent. So for those of you watching either live or on a tape delay, as we call it, what Michael is referring to as a DAW, D-A-W, it's a digital audio workstation. So think Pro Tools, any kind of software that will allow you to import multi-track audio, so multiple tracks of audio live, and then manipulate them, and maybe even play them back out. Or, I mean, there's literally hundreds of different ways you can use a DAW or a DAW. So just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and knows what Michael's talking about. And, let's talk about resources. What resources are available? And, I'm just going to open it up, whoever wants to answer. What are some resources as far as training and education that you guys have found out there and available?
Well, I can say that here recently, I was really, some resources, something that someone can use that they can take home that's real easy to learn. As far as sound goes, like I said, I know nothing about lighting or nothing, but as far as sound goes, I'm really into a lot. I use mostly iOS product. I'm an Apple product, and there's this app. It's kind of pricey. It's about $50. It's called Aria, and it's one of the first professional digital audio workstations for iPad. I'm highly impressed by it. It's the only thing I've seen on a mobile device that kind of takes you back to old school, and it teaches you how to use. Basically, you're just using. It's an analog setup, but you're just using a GUI that's set up like an analog, and it really does. It does really take you back to learning how to use EQ and compression, and I mean, you'll spend hours on it just learning stuff, talking through the tutorials and stuff. So here recently, that's the only thing I can say that I found recently that was a good learning tool, how to learn how to, mix and EQ things. It can, in a way, it can teach you how to use things live. So that's about the only thing I can say that I've found here recently as far as a resource.
Excellent. Thanks. Aaron, do you have any thoughts on training resources that are out there and available? Paul, why don't you jump in right now? See if we can't get Aaron working.
Yeah, I was just actually doing a search for one to see if I could find what it was, but there is, right now, there are a couple of online courses where you could learn how to do sound in a church from people that have been doing it a while, and I think those are probably at least good introductory steps. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I've got some stuff that's more on the video side that even if you need more experience in actually using the equipment, it'll at least give you a vocabulary of what people mean when they say, hey, tighten down the headroom, can you push into that shot, all those kinds of things that people in video say on a daily basis, and I think that's probably a good place to start. Because in a lot of churches, we've got things like people that come aboard because they're technical, but they don't necessarily have a background in the particular area that they're helping out with. So you might have someone that's never done video before, but is a photographer, or someone that's never done lights before, but they've done sound. And just getting them up to speed quickly is pretty cool.
Excellent. And I feel it's important to mention that we have 3 of our guests today on mobile devices, so it's going to be a little chaotic with data plans not necessarily being able to support a full stream AV stream like a Hangout on Air. So people are dropping off and coming back in and not able to mute themselves as quickly as they would necessarily like. So I'm just going to open this up again with another question in a minute, but I want to talk about some of the resources that I know about. There's Trade Magazine's Church Production Magazine, and of course Technologies for Worship. My issue with those magazines is that they have a tendency to focus on much larger venues and facilities than I think the majority of churches are. So it's great and everything to read about what other churches are doing and how they're doing it and what equipment they're using and all that. However, I think that there tends to be a disconnect between, oh, that's great, that they can spend $150,000 on a sound system, but we're a 300-member church. That's not relevant to us. We don't need something like that. And so I think that a lot of times churches just, especially the smaller and smaller medium-sized churches, feel kind of left out of those trade publications. And they don't know necessarily what resources are available when they want to upgrade their stuff or they need training. Some manufacturers like Yamaha will offer some sound training resources. You can certainly find places online that will offer them training. You either pay them to come in and do the training with you, or they have a DVD product that your techs can take home and kind of learn how to do. And I think the best training is, at least as far as investment on an ongoing basis, is for the church leadership to say, you know what, we realize the tech is important. Without lights, nobody's going to see anything. Without sound, they're not going to hear anything. And without live streaming, people out on the internet aren't even going to really know that we exist as a church. So tech is very important when it's used properly, and when it's part of the church budget every year. And part of that budget, I think, should be getting somebody, call them a champion, if you will, a tech team champion, to go out and get ongoing training every year, and maybe even every quarter. It depends where your vision is as far as for tech and where it fits into the overall mission of the church. However, you get that person trained to the point that they understand not only the specific equipment that you're using at your particular church, but they also understand the basics and the fundamentals, building blocks of tech, of video and lighting and audio and projection, and why there are best practices and why there are worst practices, and why you do things a certain way and why you don't do other things other ways. And bring that information and that training back, because I think the most influential and best training is from inside the church. And you have that champion that can come alongside people on the team and say, you know what, I like what you're doing, I like your passion, let's try it a different way and see what happens. Not to come across as a smart aleck or a know-it-all, but to say, you know what, I have this knowledge and this experience now, let's try and apply it in a way that that is recommended and see what happens. Make it a learning process, an adventurous learning process, if you will, for both parties. So I see, Paul, that you want to talk about this, so go for it.
Well, I'm not someone that wants to necessarily defend against what you said about the industry magazines, Church Production and Technologies for Worship, even though I have written for both of them on a freelance basis. But I've talked to both of their editors and basically shared this concern, because while I do go to a 5,000 member church, well, 5,000 in attendance, it's not the case that I don't remember being in a much smaller church, because our church was a much smaller church just a few years ago. So I think that that's something that they're aware of, and the advantage of talking about big churches is there's so many things that you can talk about, whereas when you're dealing with smaller churches, there are fewer possible details. But with that said, every month when I write my column for Church Production Magazine, sorry, Church Mag is something different. When I write it for Church Production Magazine, I'm always thinking, is there a way that we can, where this is applicable to smaller churches just as well as larger churches? Because I don't think I know everything that there is to know. So I think that that's an area of discussion. But I absolutely think you're right that that it's great when you can have someone come in or come back to the church having gone out and gotten a training and share with the other people. I think that that really helps a lot. But I also think that sometimes we run into all kinds of problems that I think that it's just ripe for some new ideas on how to deal with it. You know, I know more than once I've had a training in my church, and a dozen people said they would show up, and 2 did. And then you talk to them later, and they go, "Oh yeah, something came up, or I forgot, or something like that." And I booked the room, I'd gotten pizza for 12, I'd done everything, and it just kind of went to waste. So I think that perhaps an online component, or like you mentioned, DVDs or some material that you can hand out where you create it once or you find it once or whatever, and then you share it over and over again at the church might be a good way to do things. And I did find the couple of resources that I was thinking about earlier. But I don't necessarily need to keep rambling on if you don't want me to, Tim.
No, I think I actually rambled on a lot longer than you did, so no worries, my friend. If you want to, if you could post those resources inside the chat, that would be great. I'll make sure they get on the event page after the fact. Unless you want to talk about them as well, you're more than welcome to. I am going to try Aaron again, and let's find out a little bit about his background, how he got into tech, and how did he get his training.
Hey guys, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I'm sorry about that. I was driving home from Bible study. My name is Aaron Hope. I'm in Chicago. I am on staff at Fellowship Chicago. That's a Baptist church. And I've bounced around pretty much. I'm originally from the Washington, D.C. area. Bounced around from different churches there. Got married, moved to Michigan. Did a few different churches there, and now I'm in Chicago and probably looking to get out of Chicago soon. It's too cold here. But let's see. I got my training just by looking over people's shoulders, being stuck behind the sound booth as a way to kind of shut me up as a youth, to keep me from causing trouble. And, eventually somebody, let me move a mute button or a fader, and it was over after that. So I'm also a musician. I grew up in the church, and mostly in non-denominational churches, not tied to any specific denomination. And I've wanted to be on staff at a church, become a technical director for a very long time, and have volunteered over 5 or 6 different churches in the last 3 years. So I don't know. I love the church environment. I love helping and assisting, and I also love training volunteers like myself, and getting startup churches going, and being able to operate. I wanted to answer your last question. I missed the first 45 minutes of this thing. But I've pretty much done the same thing in terms of looking for resources that I did when I was young, looking over people's shoulders. I just do it online. I do it by following people's blogs, by following people's Twitter pages. I do it by listening to podcasts, Church Tech Weekly, and some other podcasts. And I'm digitally looking over people's shoulders now and seeing what they're up to, what things work for them, what things don't work. And it's important to kind of maybe get in mind a few people that you can kind of follow digitally, because they'll be in different places, and you might find someone who is at a similar sized church, maybe a similar worship style, and the more you kind of, and then maybe you start asking them questions online on Twitter, and you might get some interesting things back, and before you know it, you're in community and you're on a Google Hangout with great guys like yourselves. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on the last question and an introduction. It's very nice to meet you guys. Happy to be on the first call here, on my first call here.
Well, we're glad to have you, my friend, and welcome from Chicago. Love it. I mean, we've had people on this hangout. I mean, not this particular one, but this series of hangouts. Had them from Belize. We've had people watching from the Philippines. I mean, it's just awesome being able to use the internet like that. So, Aaron, I'm glad that you chimed in there because it made me think of a really important question, and I think it's really something that we struggle with as kind of, you know, official or unofficial leaders on the tech team, and that is we are passionate. You know, we are dedicated to improving ourselves, learning more, and really pushing ourselves to be the best that we can be, bring our best, and provide the best quality tech that we can for God and for the people that come to the church either online or live. Here's the question, though: how do we translate or teach that passion and that dedication and that excitement about church tech to other people? Because I think that's a really critically important component in training. And, you know, for me, it's been one that I've struggled with because my world is tech. You know, I have a video production company. I do AV consulting. I videotape and photograph weddings. This is my world. And it's my environment, you know, and it's my home environment. It's my ecosystem, if you will. And so, of course, I'm going to be really excited about it and being able to use my talents for God. But how do you transmit that and get other people excited, I guess? How do you cast that vision? And maybe that's part of it is the vision. I don't know. I'm just going to throw it out there, and whoever wants to answer, chime in.
Well, I think that there's a couple of things that really matter when you're casting any sort of vision. First off, I don't think you want to cast small vision. I worked at a hotel AV company, and when I was hired, the boss said, "Oh, it's no big deal. You come in for 5 minutes, you set up everything whenever you want, and then you leave, you come back sometime after the meeting's over, you tear it down. No biggie." Until I started working there and I found out that everything was a biggie. And the guy was just trying to get help with what he did. And so he was just casting a small vision because he knew that it would be easier to fill the role with a small vision than if he had a big vision. But I don't think that that's what we need in the church. I think it would be better to do to cast the vision like do for the Peace Corps or the Marines. You know, Peace Corps, the toughest job you'll ever love, or the Marines, the few, the proud, the Marines. Just that this may not always be easy. And then when it feels easier, the advantage to the new person is, oh, maybe I'm good at this. That's the thought they have, as opposed to, this is harder than he said. Maybe I'm bad at this, and then they want to quit. That's one thing. I think really getting the why behind the what is really big. So I say all the time that I get to change lives and eternities. Now, I'm sorry if at your church you don't get to, but I get to. That's part of how I live my life. And would I want to stay late on a Saturday night to make sure that the video gets done for Sunday morning? I'm changing lives and eternities. And it's really no kind of suffering to play on a computer and edit a video, as opposed to all my brothers and sisters in China and in Iraq and everything that are facing real persecution. That's nothing. You know, it's like fun. So I think that there's some truth there, and also that, quite frankly, I think the tech people have the best gig in the church. I wouldn't want to change diapers. I wouldn't want to be an usher. There's a lot of things that have to happen in the church, and I think we've got the best gig. So I think if you put that out there and people start to believe a little bit about it, maybe it's easier to get them on board of training. And I know that that sounds like crazy and high energy and everything, but I also think that part of what you do as a leader is you put out more than you expect to come back. So if you have a higher level of energy and a higher level of vision, when someone comes back with less, they might be coming back with what you actually want them to have, than if you start with what you want them to have and then they come back with less, which is like a kind of half-hearted effort. So I think that those are all things that you really need to put forth as you're doing the training and as you're casting the vision for new people, that this is great stuff that we get to do.
Well, he's one heck of a salesman, isn't he?
I wish my business indicated that.
Well, yeah, you and me both, brother. You
I was going
and
to
me
speak
both.
on this too.
Yeah, go ahead.
I completely agree with Paul. Your team is a reflection of you in so, and I guess I'm not speaking directly to Tim, but to the situation. We come in Sunday mornings, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 7:30, and we're dragging in. Oh, another Sunday. I can't believe this. Here we go again. And you kind of have like, if you're burnt out, you're not going to be able to have the energy to pour into the people around you, and they're going to pick up on that negative energy. And pretty soon they'll be stomping around and kind of reflecting the same thing that they see you do. So I think I completely agree with Paul. It starts with you. It starts with you providing a high level of energy. I guess even bringing in a expectation of service and exemplifying what that good servant looks like, and serving your volunteers however way you can, and just kind of, I guess, building making it a place, an environment that people want to be at, where they want to show up. Yes, we're the first ones in, we're the last ones to go, but it doesn't mean we have to dread it every week. And I'll probably let someone else pick up on that, because I know there's a lot that we can say on this. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Let me give you an example, just kind of dovetailing off of what everybody's been talking about here. And like I said, off air, I think it was, in this church that I am in right now, it's my former church, and I didn't run, but I helped run the video ministry here for about 10 years. And I understand what it's like out on camera. I've been doing camera since I was, a senior in high school in '99. So I know it gets boring, particularly in a traditional church service. And so what are some ways that I, being, the TD and the director for the day, can help liven things up and just kind of keep it fresh and light instead of letting the service itself drag us down, because it's a lot different experience for the viewer watching at home on their computer, or nowadays on their smart TV, than it is live, right? And while the atmosphere live is one that I most of the time would want to transmit, I also have to keep the energy up by switching faster than I think is necessary, or really paying attention to the service. Anyway, so my point is, I'm moderately good, I've been told, at doing different kinds of voices, and so depending on the week and how I was feeling, I would just randomly drop into a voice. Maybe Sean Connery, or Kermit the Frog here singing, or Yoda, just trying to keep it light and fresh, or Crocky, the Crocodile Hunter, at one point I had to kind of draw the line and step back a little bit because I took it a little far. One of my camera people busted out laughing in the middle of a corporate prayer. It's not good, but at least it worked, right? And a tradition that we started when I was here was called the candy shot. So if you, as a cameraman or camera person, let's say, went out and found a really creative and awesome shot, you'd get some candy afterwards as a reward. You know, it's not like I was trying to bribe them for being a good cameraman, but it was incentive to say, hey, this is something different that we're doing. It's, and yeah, okay, maybe it's a bribe, depends on the perspective. But what is it that we can do as leaders or just passionate individuals that are on the tech team to help inspire others to reach and aspire to a higher standard, right? I mean, those are just maybe some lame ideas, but it worked here. You know, it's not going to work everywhere, you know, but, you know, we had a lot of high school age kids, college age kids. Hey, man, they're just looking for the sugar rush. That's all I'm going to say. But I think we've got a really good discussion here, and I have to commend Aaron and his team. I mean, 6:30 a.m. on a Sunday. That's commitment. That's devotion. I've got to say. I go to a church that meets at 5 p.m. on Saturdays, so I've got kind of the best of both worlds. But I did want to make a point here and talk about mobile churches because they have a particular problem with training. You know, it's one thing when you have a venue and a facility that you can go into anytime you want. You know, Paul was mentioning that even though he has a facility, just getting people there for a training event, even though you got the pizza, I mean, come on, that's a universal food that tech teams run on, that and donuts. He booked the room. He did what he could to communicate the event. I mean, I don't know what else you can do other than get them excited somehow. But, you know, that's not my place to say that what he did was wrong or right. You know, he knows his place a lot better than I do. So, but we need to inspire the excitement. But again, going back to mobile churches, you know, my church that I go to now is mobile. We have 5 hours to unload the trailer, set up, run rehearsal, run the program, tear down, pack the trailer up, and get out of there. Okay? Wow. When are we supposed to do training? Right? So our training happens on the fly, in the heat of the moment, in the process. And
the church I was at last
because we can't do it during the week.
Yeah. Church I was at last year in Ann Arbor, Michigan, was mobile, and they met in off college campuses, actually at University of Michigan and then a community college. They kind of rotated randomly. So what we had to do, we had the same system every week, yes. Different room, maybe different campus. What we wound up having to do was schedule a Saturday morning where we could go into either one of the same rooms that we regularly use or a different room and practice the signal flow for the system. We tried to, before even getting in there, we made sure everything was as labeled as it possibly could be, and we broke our setup crew down into teams. So our setup crew weren't all technical people. They weren't all on the tech team. There was a team of people whose job was to unload. And what we did with them was we paired them off. We put them in pairs, and we basically just like a short list of their responsibilities for the day. And then we practiced that on that Saturday morning. And the people who really needed to know, like, you know, what needs to be plugged in where, you know, they were assigned to those parts. And we practiced, we ran through it maybe 2 or 3 times. And I think that was something that we wound up having to do quarterly for the first year. And it really worked. It really helped. So if there's a possibility for any mobile church to be able to maybe take 3 hours to rent either the same space that you're in, or a very similar space, and just kind of get in there on a different day. I think that would work wonders. The labeling thing, having things clearly labeled, and then maybe pairing people off, and giving them just a short list. When you pair people off and they're doing the same thing, during their rotation, whether it's every week or every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they get good at it. And some people will say, all right, I'm done with that. I'm good with that. I want to do something more challenging. You can switch the rotations up. After, once everybody gets good, and you can rotate them into more challenging tasks, depending on how large your setup crew is. We had like maybe a dozen people, but that is just some suggestions.
Yeah,
that helped us a lot. Yeah,
nothing wrong with,
because before doing that, our services were starting late. I think we had like a 10 o'clock service for that. Our services were starting 10:10, 10:15. People were walking in, getting their bulletin and settling in, and thinking they're gonna, be starting up worship. They're seeing, arguments breaking out on the stage. They're seeing, people, repatching, last minute, and an angry worship leader. And so, yeah, getting that practice in on a different day, it was totally worth it.
Well, I think that's a great point, Aaron, and I also think, portable church is not the only place in our society where you have to come into a venue, set up real quickly, do the thing, and then tear down real quickly. So maybe it's worth, if you're dealing with the portable church, talking to some people that do hotel AV, where they have 4 business meetings in the large ballroom all on the same day, because the hotel's trying to maximize their money, and they have a half-an-hour turnaround time to rip out the TV screens and stick in a podium and a microphone in its place, or something like that, and see if there are any tips you can learn from them. But what I was really thinking of is, we just had a concert with a guy, you may not have heard of him, Lecrae, and his guys, they knew what they were doing. They had a trailer, which we've also had Third Day in. Third Day had a tractor trailer. Lecrae had like a pull behind a truck trailer sized deal, but in both cases, it was very well organized. Everything was labeled. The person who was in charge of getting the stuff off the trailer knew what went in and what stayed, and I was just arms and muscles, not very big muscles, but muscles nonetheless. And they said, okay, you take this and you stick it in center stage. You take that, you go stage right. And they just knew exactly where everything went. And then once we had everything down, we had a professional and then someone else with them, just like you're saying, Aaron, just putting everything up and saying, okay, these are light stands, and what we're going to do is we're going to tilt them down and put the top light on, and then tilt it up and put the middle and the bottom lights on, and that's how this works, and it works great every time. So I think that you can absolutely get to a point where, one, you have as few connections as possible when it comes to portable church. Get everything rack mounted. I don't want you pulling stuff out of boxes every Sunday. Have it where it's as simple as it can be, and then secondly, have enough people that know the system inside and out, and then other people that just help them. And I think you can really accomplish a lot quickly if it's really well organized, and you can just really get that in place as quickly as possible, so you're not 10 minutes after worship going, oh, yeah, one last thing and then we'll start, which is, no one likes that. That's not good at all.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with the not the arguments on stage a few minutes beforehand, but definitely the last minute patching and that kind of thing, because sometimes rehearsal takes a certain amount of time, and well, it always takes a certain amount of time. Sometimes it runs late, so our cue to cue is put off, and we're not able to test the videos in the sermon slides and the pastor's mic. I mean, it's any number of different variables. Now, Zach, who is with us from, I forget where he's at. He said he was in the Tetons, I think. That's where he's visiting. He's originally from Walla Walla, Washington. I know this. But we're going to try his connection. He is on mobile, so we're going to give it a try. But go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So basically, I started out with as a musician, songwriter, and I just graduated with mechanical engineering, so I've had a more technical side of things. So as an engineer, or a mechanical engineer, and in the church I've been going to, there's been a great need for sound. So I've had to learn a lot of stuff from sound to broadcast engineering to all sorts of things. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we sure can.
Okay, just checking, because my video is all whacked up. So, last week I helped install a Class A TV transmitter. A while back we upgraded our sound system for broadcast sound, or all sorts of different things. So I've been basically had to lead out in renovating systems or replacing things that I didn't have a whole lot of background in. So basically my approach was to try to understand what is actually going on from a physical point of view. Like when we had to mic our 20-person choir in a room that seats maybe 250. And I basically searched online and tried to find various resources on the subject. And I should send them later, but there was a good article on the subject. And after reading that, basically I was able to distill down the principles to the rest of the team. And they actually came up with the situation that would work. But basically, when you're coming to a new situation, to try to understand what is actually happening, either from a signal flow point of view or that end of things, helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Now,
and another thing, not everybody is able to do that, but if you have at least one person on the team that is able to understand the stuff, then you can translate the main principles and everybody's able to get a grip on the subject.
I think that's a great point. I was talking to, I haven't always been on the live streaming team, so I'm coming in and some of the stuff is familiar to me, and of course every situation is a little different. So I was talking to the guy who's done it the longest, who's actually the director on the local NBC station, and he was just saying that at the station, a lot of times, and he's there because I met him when I worked there, he was saying that at the station, a lot of times people that aren't as technical will learn what buttons to press in what order, but if something goes wrong, they don't know how to fix it because they only know, okay, you press this button, then you press this button, and then you press this button, and that's what makes what I want to happen happen. But when it doesn't happen, they don't know. So it's really a good piece of training not to just say, press these 3 buttons in this order, but this is what each of these does, this is why it does, this is why we press it, and this is the idea behind how this piece of equipment works in general, so that the person can, when something goes wrong, they're more likely to understand, oh, well, I noticed this other button is lit up too. I bet that had something to do with it, as opposed to, I don't know what any of these others do. I only know my 3. I pressed those. I don't know what's going on. So having a what makes it work understanding, I think, is really good if you want to have someone that goes beyond just the I'm a technician and I can press the buttons to I understand it and I can help other people understand it and even troubleshoot when things go wrong.
Well, that's excellent point, Paul. And I think that there's actually kind of a value proposition here in that, you know, if my value is pushing buttons, then how long is it going to take for me to be like, okay, well, you know, I'm no better than a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old, let's say, right? Whereas if I'm being shown that I'm an important member of the team, right, and that my knowledge and my presence is valued enough that you want to make sure that I have good, solid, core, foundational understanding of not only A plus B equals C, okay? So if-then logic. If I push this, then this happens, and I get this result. But you want to teach me basically as much as I want to learn, and maybe even more than I want to learn. Because when I'm starting out, I don't know what I want to learn, okay? Some people that come up to us say, oh, we want to learn tech. Okay, well, we're going to start you out on the camera. Well, I really wanted to learn the sound. Well, we understand that, and you know, we have this process. You start on the camera, you move to slides, and then eventually you move to sound. And the reason for that is because whoever's operating sound is also in charge of tech at large for that weekend, for that day. And they need to understand the other 2 positions as well as sound so that they can help troubleshoot if they need to. And they would never be able to do that if they didn't work their way up. It's not start in sound, learn the most complicated thing first, set you up to fail, and then if you pass that test, then we'll teach you the easier stuff. No, start them out with the easy stuff where they're literally pushing buttons back and forth. And it's not because it's the dumbest thing, or it's really because it's the easiest to wrap your head around. And we're trying to build them up in a process that's going to help them succeed at what they're doing, not set them up to fail. I just off the top of my head, I know that my good friend Albert Westcott in California, he's been doing church tech since the 80s, and it was just earlier this year that we upgraded his system. He is the sole tech guy. Audio, video, lighting, projection, it's all just him. Problem is he's also the church pianist, he's like the head deacon, he's got like 5 hats that he wears every Saturday. That's a lot to put on one person. And yeah, okay, I got him some cool technology that will help him kind of multitask and juggle those hats, because that's what he needs to do. But that's kind of a situation where you're kind of setting up your tech to fail. You know, number 1, you're not giving them quality equipment. Number 2, you're not investing anything in their training. And number 3, they don't know enough to know what they don't know, right? And so they don't even know where to start. And that's a huge issue. You know, there needs to be a clear vision from leadership, not just tech leadership, but church leadership of this is the role of tech. This is where this church is going, and this is how tech helps make that happen every week. And I tell you, when you connect task to purpose, right? So this is what you're doing, task, and this is why you're doing it, that's purpose. When you connect those 2, magical things happen. They understand. All of a sudden, they realize the place that they have in the larger vision that the church has, the larger mission that the church has. They are a critical cog in that system to accomplish that mission. And I think once we can figure out how to do that consistently, your tech team is going to be on fire. Thoughts?
Yeah, I just
I
want to
agree.
add something. I haven't talked for a while. You had mentioned how it was a common problem because Ignite is still a mobile church, and it grew really fast, and so and I got quite annoyed with it. It was like we would have a different person running something different every week, and it was like we never had a real solid person to just do the sound or even take over what's going on with the lights. We would just have like a different person doing a different thing every week. One week he'd do the sound, one week he'd do the lights, but he or she would do the lights, but they would never know what they were doing. And the problem that we had with our church, even though it was growing real fast, was that they would buy, like, for instance, they bought, like, and of course they were just ignorant to it. They didn't realize what they were doing, and I try to influence them not to do it, but they would buy, like, one speaker would be $2,500, the other speaker will be $2,500 left and right, and then they'll get, like, $5,000 worth of subs, and they bought them, and it was like, they didn't know how to use them. They were just like, well, it should be just plug and play, and it's like, I don't know why these don't work. I think a lot of just, you like you were saying, you can't teach them on equipment that's not really right for the job either, because you can confuse them. I mean, I know we end up having to get rid of those speakers, and come to find out they were part of an array speaker system. So you had to buy like 10 of them in an array to make them sound decent. And so, yes, another problem we would have at our church was, for instance, we got the Personas board, and nobody knew how to run sound. It was just like, well, we should just be able to mash a button and it should do it automatically. And I said, no, it's not going to should do anything. You still got to know something about audio. And we were into that problem. Same thing with the video equipment. I know nothing about video equipment, but I do know that they spent $5,000 a piece on 2 of their cameras made by Sony. I'm not sure what model they are. Really nice cameras, and didn't know how to use them. And it was like, well, we should just be able to point it at, the person, and we should be able to record. So, and a lot of us, I would just get so annoyed with it because they wouldn't know how to, they didn't know how to use what they had, and instead of just, to me, I influence every church is like, start off small, and then train on that, master that, and then move up to a bigger product if you have to. And then move up from there. But it's always seemed like the reverse. I've seen it, and not just Ignite, but other churches. They would just buy really expensive gear and buy the whole shebang and not know anything how to work it. Waste tons of money. Don't know what they're doing with it. Have no knowledge on it whatsoever. They don't do that now. After spending thousands of dollars, they don't do that no more, and they've learned their lesson from that. But I've seen quite a few churches do that, and it's like, just like I said, I think I'm a big person who's like, sometimes less is more. Start big, start small, work from that, master that, and then start building up from there. Start from the root of the tree and then grow big. That's the way I believe in it. So that's all I have to say about that.
I concur.
I think there's a line there, though. Because I've seen a lot of churches make the opposite mistake, which is, oh, well, we don't need to spend any more money on equipment, and next thing you know, you've got a volunteer that's spending 20 hours a week trying to make equipment that was never designed to do what you have it do that. And so, or maybe equipment from 10 years ago. And so I think that you've got Well, there's two, I guess I would always bet on someone who really knows what they're doing using sucky equipment versus someone who has no clue using top of the line equipment. That's always a better bet. But if you have someone that starts to know more, you have to invest in better equipment. And I think that you should have equipment that's a little bit out of where they are right now so they can grow into it. Kind of like when you buy shoes for your kids, you don't buy them that fit perfectly. You buy a little bit extra because they're going to grow into them. I think that that's how we need to do tech, is allow some room to grow into it as well. But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying about buying broadcast quality equipment when no one has even touched that stuff before. And it's absolutely the case that the people are the most important piece. If there was equipment that could just do a perfect audio mix, there would be no need for audio engineers. But guess what? That's a pretty good high-paying position. And it's not because there are only two in the country. There are several really great audio engineers, and they're paid a lot of money in the secular world to do that because it takes knowledge and experience. Same for video, same for lights. There's no automatic solution, at least not yet, that does the job that someone who really knows what they're doing and has great equipment can do.
Thank you, Paul. Took the words right out of my mouth. Awesome.
I try. I mean, to take the word out of your mouth, not to be good. Just...
Fair enough, fair enough. And actually, that's a pretty good segue for us into the final component, and that is people. You know, yeah, okay, we're talking about training, but we're talking about training people. And, you know, at the center of this entire discussion is heart. You know, each of us volunteers, each of us staff, each of us tech team leaders, whatever your position, we all have a heart, and we all have a need to know that we're valued and that we're appreciated. And a lot of times that doesn't happen, sadly, and there's really no excuse for it. You know, some pastors would say, well, we don't have the budget to do anything. Well, we're not asking you to spend money on us. You know, just tell us, remind us, you know, number one, why we're doing what we're doing, connecting that task to purpose again. You can never do that too much. And two, you know, does it cost that much money to go down to the Dollar Tree and get a card and just write thanks for all you do in there? Or publicly acknowledging us on maybe the church Facebook page? Or, you know, it doesn't take a lot of money. It just takes effort. And if we're giving our best for God, does it take that much to give us a little bit back? And, you know, I understand pastors are very busy, and, you know, some pastors just have insane schedules. You know, I'm not one to degrade that or to tear it down. You know, I haven't walked a mile in those shoes, so it's not up to me to criticize or judge. But there are things that you can do to be intentional about appreciating and recognizing your volunteers. As an example, once a quarter, my church has a pizza feed for the musicians, the setup crew, and the tech. And, you know, that costs maybe $40, right? Because we have we've probably got, I don't know, 15, 20 people in between all of those various areas, you know, set up, musicians, and tech. So is it something that we look forward to? Sure. I forget about it, you know, until they remind us that it's coming up. But we have pastoral leadership that reminds us on a weekly basis of the value that we bring. And so we're very blessed in that regard. But I want to encourage other tech teams and other tech team leaders and pastors especially, you know what, be intentional. Put it on the calendar and say, you know what, on this day, at this time, we're going to do something special for our volunteers. And it doesn't have to be necessarily limited to tech. I mean, that's just the context that we're talking in right now. But the bottom line here is invest in your people, because if you try to do this all by yourself, good luck, right? I mean, especially in the case of Paul's church, I mean, 5,000 people, probably multiple services. One person going to do all that? Not likely. So it takes a team, or as they say, it takes a village. And I think every person in that village needs to know that they are valued and appreciated. So, Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly that if you're in a situation where someone is not paid for what they're doing, and even if they are, but especially if they're not, then you absolutely need to do everything you can to let them know how much they matter. And I think that's why I think that churches are primarily volunteer-run should have the best equipment that their people can use, so that, you know, if it's a $3,000 computer, and a volunteer is running it and can run the heck out of it, then that's still the cheapest money that you can spend to have a leading volunteer use a really nice piece of equipment and get every piece of value out of it more quickly than if they try and use a piece of equipment from the 90s that really only barely worked then, and they have to spend a bunch of extra time. I think that says we value you, that we will invest in you by having appropriate equipment for what you're able to use. And I also think it really says something if you have these appreciation events. It says a lot if you don't have them. It says, because people feel love in different ways. You've heard of the 5 love languages. Well, sometimes people need recognition. Sometimes they just need some pizza. Sometimes they need a pat on the back, a literal pat on the back. Sometimes they just need to know that if they need to talk to the pastor, they're valued enough that he or she will rearrange their schedule to talk to this person because it really, really matters. And those are absolutely great ways to show I care about you as a person. You really matter. And I really think, you know, if you would do it for a staff member and you have a leading volunteer, why not do it for them? So if you had a technical director who you would send on conferences to keep her training up, for example, why not do that for a lead volunteer? You know, it's still going to be less than hiring that volunteer. So if you really think of it from a money standpoint, if you send a volunteer to a conference that costs your church $1,000 and you do that once a year, that is going to say to that volunteer, I really matter and they care about me enough that they want to build into me. And where can you find someone to do something for $1,000 a year? That's like $3 a day. That's nothing, you know. So I think that's kind of some of the thinking that maybe some churches ought to consider is, how can I build into the people that we have instead of just thinking, well, someday we'll have someone on staff that'll do this and then we'll build into them. So I think that's another area of growth that churches could get into, is thinking of volunteers as just staff that they don't have to pay, and how would they treat them if they are staff and not just a warm body, but someone that really matters?
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, you have some thoughts on what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I just agree with you guys, what you're saying. All of you guys, I have no input on that.
Works for me. I think we pretty much covered this. My final thoughts are, having been in the video marketing and like corporate video worlds and church tech, there's kind of a common theme, and that is, marketing is not an expense on the balance sheet. It's an investment. And sometimes it's a risky one. Sometimes it's just a home run. It's a sure thing. But it is an investment. And church tech is an investment. And I think a lot of times pastoral leadership and churches in general, they look at tech and they say, well, they just want new toys, right? All they see is the equipment. And what they fail to see is the people. And, the investment includes both equipment and people. But the best investment, and Paul, you and I have talked about this in many a hangout, and that is the best investment that your church can make in tech is the people. If it comes down to, do I train or do I get the best equipment I can buy? Always choose training. Because if your people understand how to use the equipment, even if it's not the right equipment for you, and where the church is going, preparing them with the knowledge and maybe even the experience of how to properly use the equipment that is right for your church, setting them up to succeed from the very beginning before you even get the right equipment, is only going to pay you long dividends in the long run. That's my closing argument.
I agree completely. That's why I do what I do. Is I think that the best way it's a good just feeling to have, to know I don't want to be the only one that knows anything, right? So in my church, I don't want to be, we have to wait for Paul to get here, otherwise we can't do thus and so. No, that's never a good plan. So I want to replicate as much as possible. And in what I do for a living, I'm thinking there are churches all over the world that want to know what I can teach them. And so I want to help them know that. They may not know that I'm the one that can teach them, but that doesn't matter. It's not about me. It's just about getting the information out there so that each church is as effective as they can be. Because as it turns out, people are all that really, really matter. Heaven and earth will pass away, but the people that God has created, they have an eternal destination. And whether it's one that they'll like or not, that's really up to us and how we can share this message of good news that God has called us to share. So I think I guess that's, as you said, where the why meets the what, is that we're in the people business. We're trying to help people. And if we can just get the message out, then it really doesn't matter who does it as long as we do it. So we need to make the best of each of our one and only lives, and maybe, just maybe, we'll make a dent.
Love it, brother. Love it. Preach it. All right.
Well,
you do what you can, right?
I do what I can.
Excellent. All right, with that, we thank you for watching, and we'll be back here next Wednesday evening. talking about another awesome topic, and be looking in the community for what that topic will be. It will be announced, I promise. All right, guys. Till next time.